Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hardworking Americans and their families? You will. This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefit in benefit plan. Now prepare to learn, plan, save, and protect with the FIA Group.
Hello, everybody. This is not Adam Russo. More's the pity. It is Ron E. Peck, Executive Vice President and General Counsel of the FIA Group. Hello, Ron. Hello, Ron. So good to see you. It's even better to see you, my friend. With me is somebody that I'm a little bit less thrilled to see. I'm just kidding, Brady. The reason I'm less thrilled to see you here and not at your desk is because every moment you're away from the internet, it's one bit of information or news that we're not picking up for our listeners.
That's right.
So this is definitely a privilege for everybody who has the opportunity to listen to you today. To my right, the myth, the man, the legend, Brady Bizzaro. How you doing, Brady?
I'm doing fine. Hello, Brady.
And to my left is the triple P, the triple threat, Pat, the podcast producer. Number 1, 2, and 3 in the world of podcast production. That's a lot of P's. It's actually hurting my mouth to say. So, Brady, there's some stuff going on in the industry.
There is. At long last, we can talk finally about Medicare-for-All. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, I've actually got my resume out there. I'm looking for other work because apparently the entire private health benefits industry is going the way of the dodo bird, and we're going to have to do something else with the rest of our lives. Is that right?
It only took 19 pages. I can't believe it. But after having read all 19 pages, I conclude it's over. You're right.
Wait, you read all 19 pages? Because all I did was read the first one, where basically after the first couple paragraphs, there was a lot of self-loathing. I realized suddenly I'm what's wrong with the country, with the world. And then the second half of the first page, I realized that the solution is to just make everything free.
Of course.
And pay for it with this fund. It's going to be funded by a couple dudes with a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, the 1% will pay for everything and it'll all be good.
Because I'm middle class. I don't know about you. Are you middle class too?
I think I'm on the cusp, maybe.
Yeah, you're middle class too. Hey, Pat, are you middle class?
Maybe cusp.
Yeah. See, everybody's
Good
middle
answer.
class, That's why it resonates so well. Obviously we're being a bit facetious. We've had the opportunity, Brady and I, to go through Elizabeth Warren's Medicare-for-All proposal and line by line assess I hate to pull out a cliche, but the good, the bad, and the very ugly. It's not fair to say that the entire thing is unfit to line the birdcage. In fact, I would say that there are some concepts or ideas in the proposal that are fairly astute, objectively accurate, something that we've actually been arguing for a number of years now. The concept that, and it's pretty far down, and we'll talk about it specifically as we proceed, Brady, that it's the quote-unquote, it's the cost stupid. And I know that a lot of people in our industry are big promoters. I think over at Borisov, for instance, Mark Gagne, big promoters of the hashtag healthcare is expensive because healthcare is expensive. And that whole concept that ultimately it doesn't matter who pays. At the end of the day, if you don't address the price, then the price will be too high. And then it's about the cost. And Elizabeth Warren actually brings that up, which I thought was great. One of the inconsistencies that I mention in my assessment, which is available on our website, check it out. Go through LinkedIn or go to fiagroup.com. Check out media blogs. I did a full write-up and assessment of the proposal. Is that elsewhere in the same document, where she specifically says it's the prices that are the problem, elsewhere she says it's how we pay for healthcare that is the problem. So which is it? Is it how much you're paying or how you're paying? Ultimately, and again, I'm just going to throw this out there, Brady, and then I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. If you suddenly take a price tag that says $100 and you cross it out and you change it to $1, it doesn't matter if I'm paying for it, you're paying for it, your mother's paying for it, insurance is paying for it, or the government is paying for it. We're paying less because the price tag came down. So this concept that we're going to reduce the actual amount that's payable to providers, and that's going to reduce the cost of healthcare, forget all the implications of doing that and the impact on the actual healthcare provider market. You wouldn't need Medicare-for-All. If you suddenly required every hospital to take 110% of Medicare, which is what she's proposing, overnight, private insurance costs are going to go way down. Your premium is going to go down 90%, and insurance is still going to be more profitable. So this concept that somehow Medicare-for-All is the solution, it's sort of a red herring. Because if you're going to force hospitals to take less, it doesn't matter who the payer is, Medicare, private insurance, or out of your own pocket. The cost of healthcare has decreased because the cost of healthcare has decreased.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Ron, because as I read the plan the first time, at least, what jumped out to me was not only was she making arguments, I think we could use in the context of making self-funding stronger, but she also did her homework and revealed some facts that I think are also really good about criticizing the current system. So I think I'm glad also that we waited to do this podcast because she's since come out with sort of a 2.0 version of her plan, which sort of dials back the urgency with which she wanted to spring Medicare for All on us. And now she has a plan that's calling for a 3-year transition period. She wouldn't abolish private insurance in those 3 years. She would have a public option. And then she's hoping that people would see how great the plan is in the first 3 years and that it would kind of just, it would lead to a snowball effect and private insurance would go away. That's sort of her attempt to sort of be a bit more moderate here. But I think it's worth just going through sort of how she's going to pay for this plan. I said this on our webinar, but it's still impressive, at least I'm impressed, that she had attempted to balance the budget here because the number one critique against Medicare for All has always been, where are you going to find the money to pay for it? How can you pay for it? You can't pay for it has been the assumption. And what she's done in 19 pages is made an argument, at least, that she can pay for it. And she's enlisted the aid of a few, or more than a few, smart people and institutes to help her do her homework. And so I'll save you the having to read 19 pages and just boil it down for you in a few sentences on how she's going to pay for this. So according to the Urban Institute, who she commissioned to do a study on this, Americans are going to spend $52 trillion over 10 years on healthcare, whether or not there's Medicare for All. So that's going to happen regardless. Medicare for All, her version of the plan and the Bernie Sanders plan, basically means that the federal government is paying $21 trillion of that amount, rather than what's currently happening, which is we're paying for it, right? Or private insurance is paying for it. So how does she come up with that 21 or 20.5 to be exact trillion dollars in new federal spending? And what she does in her plan here is she goes through line by line and sort of explains where the revenue comes from. So some of that money she just shifts away from existing spending on Medicare and Medicaid, right, by the states and by the federal government. A big part of this is employers, which we're concerned with, of course, where she basically replaces the amount that employers currently pay in the current system through, cost sharing and such, through the employer mandate to effectively what I'll call a tax, but she'll call it a contribution. And that gets her $9 trillion. So there's going to be some kind of threshold about, a certain number of employees triggers this contribution that employers have to pay to the government. And that gets her $9 trillion of the way there. She finds another $6 trillion by taxing the rich or the middle class, as you said, Ron, which I think many people would fall into more than I think she thinks. But she also says she'll strengthen the existing tax code and find $2.3 trillion there, which that's probably pretty accurate. The rest of the way, though, how she gets the other remaining trillions is kind of suspect. She does note that, hey, all these employees who no longer have to pay a contribution for healthcare will get that money now in the form of salary. There's tax money there. That's technically not a tax increase, right? That gets her some money there. She relies on sort of the mystery of economic growth, generally speaking, to get more tax money that way. And then she talks about here immigration reform as getting her sort of over the finish line, which is, again, probably the most absurd part of her plan, where she's making assumptions about things that are unlikely to happen. But altogether, that adds up in her plan to the $21 trillion she needs.
Now, Brady, when you talk about the $9 trillion that she's getting from employers, and you talk about the funds that you'll be receiving in the form of a payroll tax, because now that we're not paying for insurance, we can then divert that money towards a tax.
Right.
Does that take into account employers and employees who are in the health insurance industry? Because after this law is passed, there are going to be fewer employees and fewer employers and way more unemployed people. So again, I don't know if these numbers are taken with a snapshot of the economy as it is today, because after this happens, there are going to be way fewer people who can actually pay a payroll tax because we're not going to be getting a paycheck.
Yeah. One of the strongest arguments, I think, against her plan, I think there are many, but one of the ones I haven't seen deployed just yet is when she talks about the cost, what she calls administrative costs, currently are at about 12% of what is collected either in premiums or contributions. 12% in the form of administrative costs is literally jobs, like you just said, Ron. And under her plan, she'd cap that spending at 2.3%. That's a drastic cut. And she doesn't talk about, of course, in her plan that by cutting from 12% down to 2.3, many, many people who currently work in the healthcare field, which is one of the largest fields in the country in terms of jobs, would lose their jobs. That's a huge problem for her to have to address. I expect in the debate that she'll be, at least from the smart candidates, that they'll raise that issue with her and say, well, how are you going to replace the job loss that'll result from your plan?
See, I guess technically, though, you don't need to replace the job losses because if everything is just given to me for free, why would I work? I mean, this actually sounds pretty
Touche.
good for me. I work pretty hard, and one of the reasons I work hard for you people is to get my health insurance, right? But if I don't need health insurance anymore because it's given to me, ultimately it's, hey, why work at all? It could be she's going to come knock on the door and say that I can be the caveman on the Geico commercials, because apparently I could just go work for auto or life insurance, right? That was the solution. And I'm going to say, well, why would I do that? Because I really don't need an income anymore and I don't need benefits anymore because it's all being given to me for free. So maybe this is a win-win for us, Brady. Not only are we going to continue to get everything we get now, but we're going to have to do way less work.
Could be.
I'm kidding around. It's funny too because, again, one of the things I think people often lose sight of when they're having these debates about how do we do something? How do we pay for something? And I think it was one of the lines from the original Jurassic Park, my man, Jeff Goldblum, right? Is that we were so busy asking the question whether we could, we never asked the question whether we should.
That's one of the best parts of the movie.
Great movie, great line, right? Great character. And so the thing is here is we're still talking about how do we pay for Medicare-for-All? What will the negative effects of Medicare-for-All be? We're still not asking the question, why do you need Medicare-for-All in the first place? And I think that she attempted to address that in the first few pages of her proposal where, again, she was demonizing the private health insurance market. And she's talking about how private health insurance exists solely to deny claims and make billions off the poor people. And then I did a little research and discovered that apparently the largest perpetrator of denying claims, claim denials, is actually Medicare. Medicare, on average, denies 4 claims for every one that's denied by a private carrier. But anyway, let's not go there, right?
Different podcast.
Yeah. And let's also not address the fact that, forget denials, how about the fact that Medicare doesn't even cover many, many, many health benefits that private insurance actually does. So they didn't have the opportunity to deny some of those claims that private health insurance does. But again, we're not going to go there either, okay, Pat? But the one thing that I want to say is, again, to the earlier point, is that if your goal is to make health care affordable, identify ways to make health care affordable. The means by which you then pay for that newly affordable health care, you would then address it after that. And this is sort of the drum I keep trying to beat on because I get beat up on LinkedIn and online where I'm comparing health insurance to auto insurance or health insurance to life insurance. And people say, how could you compare a human life to a car? And I'm not. I'm not talking about the good that's being purchased. I'm talking about the means by which you pay for that good. And certainly a human life, is much more valuable than the car. But that doesn't change the fact that we are so hyper-dependent on insurance to pay for everything that as a result, the cost of everything increases because of the access to deep pockets. And until you address that, the actual cost of the healthcare, changing who's paying for it, whether it's insurance or Medicare-for-All, isn't going to make a difference.
I have a theory about that, Ron. I think I'd be willing to bet that Senator Warren actually knows what you're talking about and actually probably would agree with you. I think what's going on here is that she's struggling to reconcile in her head the idea of giving everyone guaranteed access to healthcare. Because once you try to solve that problem, if your goal is everyone's going to guarantee to have healthcare and she doesn't trust insurance companies and employers to provide it sufficiently, then I feel like she gets stuck in the problem you just described, where she can't really get off the point of who's going to pay for it, right? And she can't separate that from addressing the issue of cost. Because like you said, there are many numbers and facts in her plan that really we could use that make the case why the existing system is a problem. She herself, was a bankruptcy lawyer and notes that the number one reason families went bankrupt in 2016, despite the fact that 91% of them had health care, was health insurance costs, medical bills that they couldn't pay. She talks about 87 million Americans being underinsured. She talks about 37 million American adults not filling prescriptions. Those are real problems that we know exist. And in our industry, we're trying to address these problems too. She talks about how the average family of 4 has an out-of-pocket cost of $12,378. I'd be willing to bet that for a self-funded employer, that number is probably lower. But so she's saying all the right things, like you said, in the first few pages here, but then she can't get off this notion that everyone must have guaranteed coverage and I've got to provide it. And the only way to do that is a single payer. I think that's why she's falling into your trap.
Right. And I think it's interesting because efforts to maybe not go as far as Medicare for all, but provide some sort of option that's available to people who maybe don't have access to private insurance is this concept of a public option, right? Or Medicare for all who want it and things like that. And what scares me there, Brady, is you've heard this concept of a level playing field, right? And if I, for instance, as New England Patriots fans, Brady, we're accustomed to winning, right? But I think everybody would agree, despite the fact that the Patriots have had so much success lately, and by lately, I mean like the last 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, despite the fact that the Patriots have had such success, there's no handicap at the start of the game. The Patriots don't have to play uphill, right? The field is flat. The playing field is level. Both teams have to get from one end zone to the other.
Maybe not Deflategate. I'll leave that aside, but
Again, let's not go there. Other people could have done the same thing, right? We're all on the same playing field. But no, joking aside. So what's this a metaphor for? What's the analogy? So basically, when you look at competing a public option against a private plan, if the playing field were level, I think that could actually work. I think where you say, hey, look, you don't have access to health insurance, you don't know how you're going to pay for this health care, there's this public option, whether it's subsidized through taxes or just the people who are enrolled or whatever the plan is. I don't know how they think people are going to pay for it if everybody else is staying on their private plan. I think they know as well as you and I that the public option is going to be funded by the many, many people who are going to leave their private plan and go to the public option. Now, why would they do that? They would do that because the public option, by law, can cap payment at Medicare plus 10%. Whereas your private insurance, they're paying hospitals a discount, a percent off of 800% of Medicare, 1,000% Medicare. So if my private insurance is required to pay 8, 9, 10 times as much as the public plan, or I'll be balance billed as a result, if they don't pay that amount, somebody has to pay that. And that's going to be me. Those are my contributions. Those are my premiums. But then you tell me, hey, by the way, there's this public option, and they only pay Medicare plus 10%. And by law, you can't be balance billed, that option is going to be cheaper. It's going to be cheaper for me. So why wouldn't I go with it? No joke, Brady. We work with a lot of reference-based pricing plans that use Medicare as a benchmark for their sort of pricing methodology, right? And they'll pay Medicare plus 40%, Medicare plus 80%, 200% Medicare, right? And the patient is still being balance billed. If you told me right now that there's this mystical, magical reference-based pricing plan out there that pays Medicare plus 10%, and there's some sort of thing that they've got going that prevents providers from balance billing people who are enrolled in that plan,
you'd be rich.
I'm joining that plan. So are you. Heck yeah. So I guess at the end of the day, it's not a level playing field. And a year or two later, people are going to look at it and say, hey, everybody joined the public option. I guess Medicare-for-All is the right way to go.
This is why you have a lot of pushback from, and you did at the time, and I think in the 90s when a public option was being discussed, people call it a sneak attack. It's basically like, it's going to get you to a single payer. It's like the backdoor method of getting there. So I think that's what's going on and why our industry should still be concerned about these proposals that seem a little bit more moderate, but really aren't. But I think in general, though, her plan and the continued debate we're having about Medicare-for-All and the public option, it really should be a kind of clarion call for the industry that, look, as we noted in this podcast, the industry or the healthcare system as it currently exists can't continue on the way it is. Warren has called out some of the problems that we see as well in our industry. She's got the facts and data to back some of that up in the first 2 pages. If the industry is unwilling, by that I mean like hospital groups, doctors, drug manufacturers, if they're unwilling to embrace some changes, and we've seen the struggles, we talked about them ad nauseum in the last 20 webinars probably, about trying to fix drug pricing, increasing price transparency. If they don't embrace some of these more minor changes, they may be major, but not compared to Medicare-for-All, that's what we're going to get. We're going to get Medicare-for-All or a public option. So I'm hoping that some of these proposals, requiring drug pricing in television ads, things like that, that the industries that are concerned about preventing a Medicare-for-All single-payer takeover will be willing to entertain some of these proposals, because otherwise, we're forcing the government to come in and make choices for us.
So a quick question, Brady, and you talk about, how there's this sort of this inevitability, or that there's this wake-up call that this is out there. I think that a lot of the entities that are maybe one of, I'm not going to say the cause, but one of the causes of the issues about which this is supposedly a solution, right? If you ask them about this, I think the knee-jerk reaction is, it's never going to happen. I don't have to worry about this. This is silly, right? So, and maybe they're right. I don't know. But the point is that they don't feel that there's even a need to negotiate with your private plan and accept Medicare plus 40%, because the alternative is they're going to get Medicare plus 10% from the government, right? Because if I come in and I say, hey, look, if you're not willing to work with me right now and come down to something that we could both live with, then a year or two from now, you're going to be getting Medicare plus 10% from the government, they laugh in my face because that threat is not real. People don't believe that that could actually happen. And so I wonder if, again, let's say hypothetically there is a situation where the last election, nobody thought Donald Trump was going to win, and he did, right? So sometimes people are going to be surprised. I guess they got to get kicked in the head a few times before they realize that they should put a helmet on. But I wonder if you have a situation where, let's say, someone's elected, we end up passing some sort of law where now there is a public option, and it is paying Medicare plus 10%. If I'm a private plan and I need to compete for lives with that public option, is that now the time? Now, mind you, that Medicare plus 10% public option, there's a law protecting people on that plan against balance billing.
Sure.
There's no law protecting people from balance billing on my plan, right? But if I can still go to that provider and I could say, hey, look, I'm terminating my network agreement with you. No more discounts off bill charges. You're going to accept Medicare plus 80% from me. And you're going to sign a contract that says you're going to accept that as payment in full, and you won't balance bill my employees. You won't balance bill my participants. And if you don't do this, they're going to go to the public option, and then you're going to get Medicare plus 10%, and you can't balance bill. So it's either 80% from me or 10% from them. Make your choice right now.
Wow.
So I do
Good
wonder
choice.
if, ultimately, if there are those who are willing to forego the status quo and maybe emulate a slightly more generous public option. And then you ask, okay, well, then how are we going to make up the difference? That's 70%, right? Public option's paying plus 10%. I'm paying plus 80%. How am I going to make up the 70% difference and keep myself competitive as someone who's been in the industry for a long time, as someone who is experienced administering claims, customer service, add-on services, cessation programs, things like that. Things that you can offer that a public option wouldn't offer makes it worth paying the extra contribution.
Right. Well, I hesitate to see if that'll be the future, but I think more likely we're going to see people paying more attention to this plan. I think already lately you've seen some hostile CEOs sort of take it more seriously. At the end of the day, the reality is we're talking about Medicare for All a lot more than we ever used to. And as a result of that, I think we could see people taking it more seriously going forward.
Well, Brady, we're just going to have to wait and see. I think at this point, we're potentially going to see one of four possibilities. Either A, it all goes away. We end up either reelecting President Trump, or you elect someone like Joe Biden, and then the public option that he was talking about is kind of like, we'll get to it at some point, if I remember, right? And that gets, brushed under the rug. And this becomes just a distant memory. Option B is we elect somebody who does push through some sort of public option, but it ends up being maybe a bit less of a threat than we thought it would be. And like I said, maybe it actually gives us an opportunity to, play some hardball with the providers on behalf of the plan. Say, look, the other options, people go to the public option. You don't want that, do you? Option C is that we end up with Medicare for All, and it's shoved down our throats. And I don't know, man. I guess I got to brush off my resume and figure out what I'm going to do with my life,
Nice
right?
knowing you.
Yeah, seriously. And then I think the final option is that maybe there's a solution that just hasn't been presented yet.
I think that could be, by the way, strengthening the ACA. That may be what we go for in terms of the fourth option.
And I think in that, I would say at least in the first couple, right, where nothing changes or there's a public option and it gives us an opportunity to compete. And in that last option where there's some other solution we haven't really discussed, everything other than a pure Medicare for All world, I think there's a huge opportunity for private self-funded plans to get creative. Because I can tell you right now, if you told me that there was a public option that pays Medicare plus 10%, and because they're shortchanging the hospitals, my contributions to join that plan would be less than what I pay to be a part of the FIA Group's health plan, I would still be on the FIA Group's health plan because of the other benefits, the other things I get by being part of this plan, the wellness, the things that would never be covered, like acupuncture, right? Everybody knows the story about what my wife went through with the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and how we were taken care of, that I know on that public option, I would not have been treated as well. It was worth the extra contribution out of my wallet to be on this plan, but it was the bells and whistles that made it so. That's where self-funded plans can thrive, even in the face of a public option.
I agree.
All right, Brady. Well, as always, it's a pleasure to talk politics with you, buddy. On behalf of myself, the Triple P, Triple Threat, Pat, the podcast producer, and Brady Bizzaro, and the spirit of Adam Russo, who sits between us, just like two kids at a prom, right? I am Ron Peck, Executive VP and General Counsel of the FIA Group. Listen, it's been great having you, as always, on the Empowering Plans podcast. Thank you so much.